for anyone who's listening that is struggling with emotional eating, you are not alone. It's really, really common. It's just everybody has a different way of responding to stress. And emotional eating is one of those responses that we have as a short-term escape from whatever it is that we're feeling.
Hello, I'm Dr Jodi Richardson, and you're listening to, well, Hello Anxiety, a podcast where we end the struggle with anxiety and build our toolkit of practical skills to thrive. Hello, everyone. This is take 2 on the intro because I use a lot of adjectives because I'm really excited about today's guest. I'm welcoming back the wonderful Carly Taylor from Carly Taylor Coaching. If you've been with me from the podcast since episode 1, you'll know that Carly was guest number 1, and really I invited Carly to join me for the first episode because I knew that together Carly and I would be able to really set the tone for the podcast, what it is that I want to be able to share with you, how I want to support you, and how I want to bring people into your world through this podcast to support you. And the feedback that I've had on Carly's episode and the listeners who have then gone to Carly to work with her as a coach have just really filled my heart and really helps me to know that these episodes are really striking a chord and making a difference. So Carly is back. So welcome back today, Carls.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back.
Oh, look, let's just dive into it. We're going to talk today about the idea that, we can reach for a little snack, a little something to give us a little burst of dopamine and a little reward when we are struggling, when we are either distracting ourselves or we just feel like we need a little bit of cheering up, or we feel like we need a little reward or a treat. And how, in the true essence of the happiness trap, it can sometimes then spiral into an issue that creates more challenges for us on top of the ones that we already had. So today's episode is for all of us, and I think it'll really help us to think differently about how we manage our emotions and understand more about why we reach for the pantry door, even multiple times in one day when we know nothing else has arrived in the pantry. We'll just desperately go back and look to see if there's anything there that's more appealing than last time. So, and I want to also add, before I launch into a question, is that Carly is a nutritionist. So when I had these questions coming through and I thought of who would be the most perfect person to speak to, I thought Carly's got the expertise, not only from the psychological perspective in terms of the way she works with her clients who present with lots of challenges, but also that nutrition background as well. So Carls, on the topic of emotional eating, is it as common as I predicted just now?
Look, I think it's very common, and all of us are unique. We all have our issues, and often we feel very much alone with that, and how we respond to our stress and how we respond to our emotions. But there's this common humanity that I think is just so important to recognize. And that's that, our connection is not only through joy and happiness and all the good stuff that happens, but we're also connected from, the fears that we have, the anxiety that comes up, that sort of that landscape of emotion that makes us human. And so for anyone who's listening that is struggling with emotional eating, you are not alone. It's really, really common. And it's just everybody has a different way of responding to their emotions, a different way of responding to stress. And emotional eating is one of those responses that we have as a short-term escape from whatever it is that we're feeling.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that you've drawn on the idea of the whole emotional landscape, because the idea of self-compassion alone is that when we turn some compassion, and I've just naturally put my hand on my heart, because when I offer myself self-compassion, that's what I'll do. I'll acknowledge that this is a moment of suffering, and that suffering is a part of being human, and that I can practice acceptance in this moment and kindness towards myself. And one of the great things about that self-compassion is just that awareness that this is common. You are not alone if this is something that you do. And I have a great toolkit of management strategies. This is something that I used to do. It was my go-to strategy was chocolate, the old Cadbury Dairy Milk. Now I purchase Lindt chocolate that is 78 to 85% cocoa because I like it. I don't love it.
Yeah,
I
can't have
can have
too
a little
much of
bit.
it.
Can't have too much of it. So I really love that you've brought up that that idea that it's common amongst people, and I think it's very painful because people who do turn to food to comfort themselves, and we do want to seek comfort, and that's something that is a large part of it, that we don't do well at tolerating discomfort, and that's sort
Yeah.
of part of our conversation. It's very painful, isn't it, for people who know that turning to more food, whether it's sweet or savory or whatever you can get your hands on, know that it's not the answer, but in the moment, it's really so difficult to change that behavior, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, and I guess that it's not the answer long term. It's certainly the answer short term. It's just because short term it does give you that relief. And that's why we do it, and we get that dopamine hit. And dopamine, gives us that pleasurable feeling, but also it's the hormone for motivation. So, we're more likely to do it again because we know it's that short term relief. But if you look at long term, is this behavior taking you towards the person that you really want to be and how you want to treat yourself? And I think that's one of the approaches that I would have with my clients, is for them to really get some clarity over who they want to be and what are their values, what's important to them, and use those as a compass in their behaviors. And once you've got that, you've got more self-awareness of the behaviors that you're doing. Rather than being in autopilot, you can respond, and you can identify those behaviors that are taking you towards or away, which we've probably mentioned in some previous podcasts, which is Russ Harris's choice point, which is just a brilliant, simple but powerful
It
model
really
to
is, isn't it?
use.
Is this taking me towards what the sort of person I want to be and what's important to me, or away? And the tub of Ben and Jerry's is probably going to be away, although I know when Russ talks about that, he talks very much about context, and that sometimes a choice in,
Yep.
like, for example, our daughter had a birthday last week, and whilst she's recovering from gut issues at the moment, under normal circumstances, a beautiful piece of homemade red velvet cake, and I nailed that red velvet cake with
Oh,
her
well
that
done.
afternoon.
Well
Oh my
done.
gosh, we had such fun. We threw flour at each other and everything. We had a lot of fun in the kitchen. On a regular day where we're really helping to heal her gut and really being careful about what she eats, that would be an away move. But in the context of a 12-year-old birthday for a kid who's had a long haul and needs a bit of fun in her life and a bit of celebration, a beautiful piece of red velvet cake is a towards move.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to be able to share that. But it is the idea that the autopilot idea that you just shared, it's a hard one to work with. It takes time, doesn't it? Because we can get these ingrained behaviors that we can't just change in a moment.
Yes, yeah. And a lot of those behaviors are certainly not based on willpower or weakness or any of those things that we often come up in our head with that self-talk of, afterwards, that when we feel guilt, and that's when we start to berate ourselves. But, depending on, and everybody has their different circumstances, and, stress eating or emotional eating can go from a couple of times a week, to every night, or even through to an eating disorder. So there's sort of this spectrum there. And also people are under different levels of stress as well. And we know that's the physical or the physiological effects of stress affects a host of hormones, and I couldn't even pronounce most of them. But one of them's cortisol, and the other one's ghrelin. And we know that when you're anxious, obviously you're going into that fight or flight response. And normally the blood flows all to the extremities of the body because you're getting ready to fight or flight, and it takes away from being hungry because you don't have time to eat. But what actually happens, what they've shown in the research, is that after you've felt the stress, an hour or so after you sort of calm down, it actually brings on an appetite response. And you are more likely to crave food that is high calorie dense and that has fat, sugar, and salt in it. So there is actually a physiological response in the body to crave those sort of foods, and I think that should come as a relief to some people, to show that it's not just them being lazy or being having no willpower or being greedy. There actually is a response that's going on that is causing them to crave those foods. And then there are things you can, obviously that's not that you've just got to accept that and go, oh, well, I'll just I'll just eat them, because long term it can lead to weight gain and it can lead to a host of other diseases that can be prevented.
So when I love that you've shared the idea that when we are under stress, we have the release of adrenaline, and then if that stress continues, the cortisol is released. And I can share with you and share that I've been under an enormous amount of stress. I've had a huge cry. I actually called Parent Line earlier this morning because it's been very, very stressful having a child who's not well, and also really and really needing to talk to a counsellor. I don't have a psychologist at the moment. I visited with one in lockdown who didn't seem like the right fit. I was managing really well, but the right fit psychologist is really important. And because I haven't had the need for one for a while, and I attempted to sort of bring one into my life, it wasn't successful. They're very hard to get into. But I called Parent Line here in Victoria. In Australia, we can call Parent Line, and I did so last week and was on hold and didn't get through. And in fact, the call was terminated eventually after being on hold
Wow.
for a long time. So, but it was I just sort of waited on hold and was just feeling my feelings. I was outside with the chickens where nobody could hear me because I'm not alone a lot these days. And when I called Parent Line today, I got through immediately, and I was like, oh, hallelujah, and had a really good cry and a really good chat and a really good conversation about where I'm at.
Mm.
And really, because I know I have that awareness that I'm under a lot of stress. I have a lot of competing demands. I feel like I'm losing the ability to continue to function at the level that I want to function at because of all of these ongoing challenges. And one of the things I have noticed about myself is my appetite. I'm just being filled with cortisol and I am just not hungry, which is the opposite of where I am normally.
Yep.
And today I felt sick this morning because, the stress is so high, and I didn't eat breakfast, but I always really try to look after my nutrition and treat myself well. But I've just experienced that from that point of view, but I haven't been experiencing the relief that comes when the stress passes. And this is the thing about chronic stress, is that it messes with our biochemistry in ways that can have ongoing effects for our mental health and our well-being.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up the idea that the adrenaline boosts us, we get going into fight or flight. The cortisol, if the stress is ongoing, it suppresses our appetite. But eventually when it passes, which is natural with stress is good a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
We get our appetite back and we reach for those things where the body really wants to fuel up.
Yeah, because we want to fuel up from the energy that we've released, which is, as it's, hunters going out hunting and being stressed from the dangers and everything. It's just that our environment's changed, but we still have that same response. So at the end of the day, if it does calm down, then that's when we've got to replenish that energy.
Yes, and that those physiological drives are so strong. They're so strong. And you said we can't rely on willpower. We cannot. We're doomed to fail if we're relying on willpower. So what can we do when we are, for those listeners that understand and can self-reflect and recognize that they are turning to food for comfort and they want to make change. They've tried the willpower avenue and have tried and failed and feel down on themselves because they know what's best but can't seem to continue with the make good decision making.
Yeah.
What's the alternative?
Yeah, and I must say a common theme that I find is when people come for eating, a lot of the time it's at night. So that's, you kind of understand that, because the stress is during the day, and then you get home, and then you might have dinner and the kids and all that sort of added stress. And then your bucket's empty, and you go, right, I'm just going to sit on the sofa, I'm going to watch my show, and I'm going to eat chocolate. And then you have this voice in your head that says, no, 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 don't do that, because that's, yeah, I know this isn't good for me. But a lot of time that self-talk can be, stuff it, I've done it before, I'll just do it again. What's the point of stopping now? It's like, I'm on this path, I may as well stay on it. So that's when the battle can go on in our heads. And it's the knowing doing gap, isn't it? So many people know what to do, but they're just not doing it. So I say, get out of the library of knowledge and get into the action field, go into battle in the field and be an active warrior. The first thing I would look at is, because everybody is different, is look at the fundamentals. Like, I would look at sleep patterns. I'd look at nutrition, what they are eating during the day, exercise, how much exercise they're getting, and connection, because as you know, everything is integrated, and you cannot talk of one without the other. So, sleep is a big one, because sleep has a knock-on effect to stress levels. We find it harder to manage stress when we're sleep deprived. We tend to eat more because it affects our hunger hormones. So if you can get your sleep right and have a good sleep hygiene routine at night, then that can have a positive effect on the emotional eating as well.
Before you continue, can you talk more about the idea that if you are not well slept and you don't get that rejuvenating sleep, that it impacts what you crave the following day? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, that's to do with the balance of the hunger hormones. And so when we're sleep deprived, we tend to be more hungry. So we eat more, and we eat more high calorie food. And we all know, I've done it before. If I've been out to a dinner party or a party and I'm sleep deprived, you crave the burger or the chips or whatever. So that's that can be a product of sleep deprivation. But if it's ongoing, then that's when it can be detrimental to your health, because you're making choices each day that aren't feeding your body the nutrition that it needs.
And those hormones are leptin and ghrelin?
Yes, that's
And
right. Yeah.
ghrelin is the hunger hormone. Am I right in that?
Yes.
Because I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
of your tummy growling. That's how I had all
Oh,
through
growling,
university.
ghrelin. Yeah.
Growling. And leptin is the hormone that is released when our
When you're full.
gut sends a message to our brain that we're full.
Yeah.
I know people that don't think they have any leptin in their body.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've got a couple of teenagers, so I don't think they've got leptin developed
leptin
yet.
either.
Yeah.
More leptin, please. More leptin. So thank you. So you started to share about these fundamental things that we can do, and you've talked firstly about sleep. What else?
Yeah. So exercise is a huge one. And as far as stress management, exercise is just has to be your number one, because there is so much research now that shows that the knock-on effect for exercise and having that positive impact. They did some research on women, and it showed that women who were fit had, and this is all done in a lab doing stress tests with them, women who were fit had a better response to those stresses than women who were not fit. So actually being fit, and look, if you're not into exercise, it doesn't mean that you've got to be going to the gym or running marathons. Even if you just start exercising, get your heart rate up, that is going to have a huge impact on your ability to manage stress.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that you came to that. And if you are exercising, could you talk to us about the idea that there is a line of thinking, and it might be not a line of thinking a lot of people use these days, but I did my exercise, therefore I can eat.
Oh yes, yeah, that's the reward of of exercising. And look, this comes down to nutrition as well, because I know when I do high intensity exercise, my hunger does increase because obviously you're burning calories, and eating, moving into nutrition. It's making sure that 80% of your nutrition is real food, real whole food. So there's this saying that real food isn't doesn't have ingredients, real food is ingredients. And just really keeping your processed foods down to your treat food, so that's your 20%. So for example, I'm assuming that your chocolate that you eat is your 20% treat, and then is that balanced out with the rest of the day? Yeah.
Very much so. Yes, I was a sweet tooth, and with unrecognized anxiety and a really super fast metabolism and a life filled with exercise, there was no issue in growing up as a teenager. Although I don't remember having, I wasn't terribly body conscious. I was just so into my sport, but I didn't have an issue with weight. I could eat
Yeah.
what I wanted. It was not a consideration for me. But as I've become older, I want to maintain a healthy weight because health is such an important value of mine. But I care and understand much more about the health implications of my nutrition. So if I generally can go through the day with my breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm more of a veggie eater than a fruit eater. And after dinner, if I'm looking for something, I'll just have like even just a half of one of those Lindt squares is enough.
Yeah.
And that sort of satisfies that craving. I have an urge for other things. I recognize that I want more, but we just make the decision in the supermarket. Oh, I do the shopping, that there's really never anything great here to satisfy any of those cravings. So if I were to really want to, have a real treat, I would have to make the effort to go out and actually
Yeah.
get it. Yeah,
Yeah. So you've made it harder for yourself.
I have, yes.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
still do go out and get things for myself
yep,
sometimes. Sometimes I make a very conscious decision that I want to get myself a treat and I will go and get it, but I don't make a habit of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm with emotional eaters. That I know that the thought of that would be really, really difficult, because there are some, food. It's just like with alcohol, making sure that you're you're stocked up with your wine just in case you need that as a response to you're trying to relieve stress through drinking wine. A lot of people will stock up their cupboard with food just in case, or when they need the food to alleviate the pain from the stress. So the thought of that, and that's where discomfort tolerance comes in. So, you're right to create a habit, make it as easy as possible for you. And you've done that by not stocking your cupboard with the food that you're likely to go to, because that would be easy for you to create a bad habit. But to actually not have the food in the cupboard in the first place is a really effective approach, that would require somebody to be willing to feel a level of discomfort for a period of time until it becomes a habit for them.
Yes. And in saying that, you've taken me back to years ago when I was working as an exercise physiologist and working with I had a large proportion of clients who came to see me for their mental health, for me to support them with their anxiety and depression in particular, as well as rehabilitating from surgery and chronic pain and chronic illness, like diabetes and the like. And part of my work there was uh, running the education and and orchestrating the exercise program for a group of people who joined a program because they were struggling with their weight, and most of the people who were in this program were obese. And it was an integrative approach with psychology and a general practitioner, exercise physiology and physiotherapy. It was a really beautiful integrative approach. And what was so eye-opening for me in that experience was hearing the the people who were struggling with their weight in the most painful and distressing way, hearing some of the lengths that they would go to prepare their not prepare, sorry, to be prepared for when the cravings came.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
one shared in particular that I won't reveal their gender, even though it's obviously completely anonymous, but they would the embarrassment of being a person living in a very large body, going to the supermarket every day after work to stock up on comfort food,
Yeah.
but also popping an iceberg lettuce or a few apples or something in there as a way to kind of show the person who was scanning the food that, oh, I don't just eat
Yeah.
highly processed food. But a lot of it can come, and we're not sort of going to dive into this today, but there a lot of people who've experienced trauma who haven't had the support, the help, the counseling, the therapy that would help them to move through and process their experiences. Sometimes they're quite deeply ingrained habits, aren't they?
Mm.
Uh, in trying to cope with trauma that is untreated. I think that's
Yes.
probably reasonable to say.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think that is probably more common than we think.
Mm.
That act of stocking up that basket and having it in anticipation of needing it later on. Yeah.
Yes, and now that you can, because the embarrassment of going through, I mean, I remember when I used to have to buy even tampons, or I had here's an FYI, sorry fellas again, I know fellas listen, but I had an endometrial ablation after having children because my periods were just so heavy. And I think we should all be able to talk much more openly about these things in general. But sorry, fellas, if that's making you a bit uncomfortable, we'll be done in a moment. Um, I had an ablation, so I no longer have a period. But I remember even going through the supermarket and buying tampons or pads. If there was a young sort of register operator, a young guy or something, I would just sort of feel a bit embarrassed that,
Yeah, yeah.
because, and so I can understand now the idea of being able to scan your own,
Oh, yeah,
bag
it's
your own
easier.
shopping
Yeah.
might even change behaviours, because no longer is there that idea that, well, I want A, B, C, and D, but I'm only going to get A and B because I'm too embarrassed to put it all through the register.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, that's not something I'd thought about before. But um, yeah, it's certainly there's that continuum, isn't there, from deep pain and trauma, uh, for some, and that's a coping mechanism that they've relied on,
Mm.
through to other people who might not identify with such a deep level of trauma, but still have stresses and pains and difficulties because they're human
Yeah,
and
yeah.
haven't got a coping toolkit.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I think it's that coping toolkit that is just so imperative to learn, because these urges to eat the it's a neurobiological urge to eat fat, sugar, and salt. They're not going to go away, and I guess that's where the struggle is. The struggles with the guilt, and they wish that it'd go away, but it's how we respond to them. And there's an exercise that I go through with my clients, which I find really, really effective, and that is to recognize that there's different parts to us, and there's a part of us that is that goes, go on, eat the chocolate, and going, you deserve it because you did the workout, or you've had a shit day, come on, just sit down and just relax and just eat the Tim Tams. And so that voice can be really powerful and loud, and often we're so sort of fused with it that that's what we do. We just do what that voice in our head does. But we do have another voice in our head that says, you want to be a healthy and fit person, or you need to, that if you lose weight, you're going to be healthier. It's going to be less risk of disease, all of that sort of stuff. So there's always, it's almost like the devil and the angel on our shoulders. So I have this exercise that I go through, and it's called the Sage and the Gremlin. So we've all got gremlins, and if anyone's seen the movie Gremlins, if you feed the gremlins, I think they get bigger or they multiply. I can't remember which one it is,
I
but
can't either. I've got visions of really angry violent gremlins.
Yeah, and if you give them food, they I think they multiply. I think that's what it is. But we've all got these gremlins, and that's the gremlin that berates us. It's that negative self talk, all that sort of stuff, and it's just that part of us that part of our minds or brains that is just trying to protect us. But often it doesn't help. Sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. And then we have the sage, and the sage is like the wise one. The sage is almost like our advisor. What would the sage do in this situation? And the sage is our character strengths, like those strengths that we have, those strengths that we want more of. So you can think of somebody else. It could be a friend, it could be a superhero, it could be a celebrity. And you think, I actually want more of that strength or that characteristic about them, because we've all got it inside us. We just need to tap into it. So we've got, and the analogy that I use is who's driving the car. So if the gremlin's driving the car, that's the direction that you're going to go in. So if you are doing a behavior that you know long term is not helping you, but you are allowing the gremlin to take over, then you're going to go down that path, and that's what you're going towards. But if you let the sage, if you boot the gremlin into the back seat, or lock her in the boot, or just put her in your back pocket, because you can't get rid of her. I'll call it a her. You can't get rid of her. She's around and said, but what you can do is not pay attention to her. So this is kind of using your attention. Get your sage into the driver's seat, because that's the direction you're going to go. So if you want to be somebody whose health is a priority, if you want to be a good parent, if you want to be a fit person, if you want to be a good worker at work, or good with time management, or whatever it is that's important to you, when you're in a situation when you have to choose, and especially if there is a level of discomfort that's going to bring up as a result of that choice, you can go to your sage and say, well, what would my sage do in this situation? In the case of emotional eating, when you go starting to walk towards the pantry to get the chips or the chocolate or whatever it is that you're going to eat to build that comfort, and that little voice comes into your head that goes, oh, no, I shouldn't be doing this. So just say, okay, well, what would my sage do in this scenario? And I've used this on myself I daily.
Yes.
Because every day the sage and the gremlin are going to pop up. Every day the gremlin is going to be there. So the best way is to name your sage and gremlin. So, and by naming them, it's creating, I'm sure you've talked about metacognition. It's creating that distance between you and your gremlin and you and your sage. And you're able to notice what's going on, as opposed to being glued to it and kind of caught up in it. And in that way, you're able to make choices that are more aligned with what's important to you, your values, than choices that are more aligned to emotion. And that's kind of the whole purpose here, is a life based on purpose rather than a life based on emotion.
The idea of living by our values is such a powerful one. And in different episodes over the podcast, which is actually, we're recording this ahead of time, but I've actually hit 6 months. 6 months of weekly
Wow.
podcasting, which is a huge milestone. So
Big
thank
clap.
you. So we're recording this on the 30th of March, and this episode will come out in a couple of weeks. But yeah, it's pretty exciting. But the idea of values have come up in most episodes, this idea that when we understand what's important to us, and I'm just reiterating for the listeners, the idea that when you know what's important and you can develop the skills to be able to sort of observe what's happening. And I've used the metaphor before. I learned a new metaphor today, but I'll stick with the one I've shared before, which is the idea of when we're swept away by our thoughts and we're in automatic pilot, it's like getting swept down a raging river, which just even the thought of that creates anxiety. There's no control. There's no being present. There's a lot of stress, and there's really not much that you can do to sort of support yourself. Whereas if you can hop out of the river and watch your thoughts going by rather than being swept away from them, then that puts us in that beautiful position to be able to uh, make a different decision. And what you said before is so beautiful, is that it's about attention, because we know we can't control what we think,
Mm.
but we can build attentional control.
Yeah.
And when we can put our attention, get out of that autopilot, and that does take time, and it might require reminders to be put around or different things like that we can talk about. But when you can get out of that autopilot and be able to observe what you're thinking, then and one a beautiful way to be able to do that is to write it down.
Yeah.
If you're having a thought, you can write it down, and therefore you're able to sort of be more of an observer. And like you say, then you can recognize what it is that's happening in
Mhm.
your head and ask, what would your sage do? Which is just, and like you say, you're using these skills daily. These are skills that have absolutely changed my life and are what turned me in the direction of the work that I do and starting the podcast, because they're incredibly powerful, and they can help people make change in their lives very, very quickly, can't they?
Yes, yeah, yeah. And it's a daily you work on it daily. Like you're never exonerated from this work. You keep going. So it's not like you learn the skill and that's it, you move on to another one. Every day, and as you talk about triggers as well and reminders, and writing things down. One of the things that and if anyone's heard me on podcasts before, I rave about journaling, because journaling is such an effective tool for increasing self awareness, for self reflection, for setting intentions. And every morning, well, not every morning, most mornings, I will journal before it's my morning routine, before any inputs. So even before my coffee, before I look at my phone, before check emails, before kids get up, I will journal. And sometimes it's only for about 5 minutes, but I set an intention for the day. It's like, who do I need to be today? What strengths do I need to draw on? I might have a reflection of the day before, but with the emotional eating, if that is a behaviour that you do want to stop, you want to change, then journal it and say, right, today I'm going to draw on courage, because I know this is going to be really, really difficult, but this is what I'm going to do. And it sets the intention, it puts it down on paper, and then you use it as data. And you can go back and look at it the day before and go, okay, I did write it down, but I still ate at night, even though that wasn't my intention. Okay, well, what happened? It's like, just have a reflection. I was really, really stressed. This happened, and then reset the day after, the next day. So journaling's a really, really great way to practice that observing thoughts, and really taking more control over your choices.
Mm. Dr. Renee Kasia spoke at length about self-reflection in a previous episode, and it was really beautiful. And what you've just said aligns, not that it has to, because I love that on the podcast you get to bring in people with different ideas and approaches, but it's also very reinforcing, I think, when people are reading from the same hymn book, or singing from, what's the
Yes,
saying?
yeah,
Singing
yeah.
from the
Singing
same
from the
hymn book.
same, yeah.
And I think I love the idea that when you do that, raising that self-awareness is such a powerful step towards being able to make lasting change. And I think we can go through life on autopilot, can't we? And especially when it comes to the management of stress, because let's face it, you don't get long between punches, feels like.
Yeah.
They're not all punches. Sometimes they're just little nudges. But one of the great happiness myths is that we're not happy all the time, and that life can be really difficult. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what sort of a person you are. Gosh, I look at my experiences as a mother, and I look at a son who lacerated his liver just the day before kids went back after the 6th lockdown in Melbourne. And so
Oh,
4 days in the children's trauma patient, lots of stress, lots of worry,
yeah.
and then now an ongoing chronic issue. And you just think, well, that's just my lot, and I need to learn to cope and use this and build the skills and the practices that enable me to manage this and whatever else life throws at me.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Life's definitely not a straight line. It's like a ship when it goes from one point to the other. It doesn't go in a straight line. It curves and goes in like a zigzag, and that's exactly what it is. It's like we can't expect everything to be all fairy floss and rainbows in our life. And Socrates, that quote, know thyself, is it's so important to have that, increase your self-awareness, and to have that self-awareness and know how you respond to things, what your autopilot is. And because it's then when you do know yourself and you can reflect on it, that's when change can happen.
Mm. And so thank you. I love that quote. And I know that you have a strong stoic background as well, and
Oh.
as your family. So thank you for sharing that with us. When when a person is so so just to sort of recap on some of the ideas that you've shared today that are so powerful to help anyone who is engaging in emotional eating or engaging in an unhelpful coping strategy, because
Yeah,
this would
yeah,
apply across a lot, wouldn't it?
yeah.
The idea of the sleep, nutrition, exercise, that mindful awareness, and that self awareness of what you do on autopilot, and the idea of journaling and boosting self awareness so that you're better able to understand your behaviors and actions and what's triggering them, and
Hmm.
you're in then a better position to be able to make change. What about the person that is reaching for the pantry door and about to indulge in something else? And sometimes they're not even indulgences. Sometimes they can be ordinary snacks that aren't really that exciting, but it's
Yeah.
just that process of eating, isn't it? It doesn't have to be chocolate or ice cream.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I know some people, would make a sandwich and then another sandwich, or even just crackers and cheese or something. So when you're in that moment and you're reaching and you have that, you've built that awareness to be able to say, I'm having an urge to
Hmm.
eat now. I'm not really hungry. What would my sage do? What do we do next? What's next? Because you're asking the question, what would the sage do? But you're filled with this urge and this craving, which is
Hmm.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we want to get from not opening the pantry to getting back to where we were. How do we manage that sort of moment?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it could be that you actually don't go back to where you were and change your environment. If there's a habit of turning on Netflix and watching a show and eating at the same time, then that, even just that trigger of watching the show is, oh, sorry, that even that sort of habit of watching the show is going to create the trigger to eat the food. So it's to do something completely different, change your environment, and do something quite mindful. So it could be, depending on the time of day, of course. I always think at night. I always think of emotional eating at night. So that's kind of where my mind's going now. But having a bath, a candlelit bath, doing something nice for yourself, um, going to bed and just lying on your bed and reading a book, going and talking to somebody. If you've, a lot of houses these days have TVs in different rooms, and everybody disperses. And so, you could be on your own. So actually going and talk to your kids, or talk to your husband or your wife, and interact that way. I think doing something that gets you into the present moment and enjoy the present moment right here, right now. Um, and that could alleviate the urge. It might not get rid of it. That urge might still be there to go to the pantry, but you're doing something meaningful for you, rather than something mindless.
The idea that we can change our environment, so we're not putting ourselves in the same position where those cues are really triggering us to repeat behavior. And it's probably no surprise that my favorite, it's so funny, mum and I have a joke and we call it Tom and Jerry's, but it's Ben and Jerry's. If I indulge, I love Ben and Jerry's Netflix and chill. And there is something about that, sitting down and the day is done. And
Yeah.
then also, I guess that the thing too is when we're busy and moving through the day, and I think the idea of emotional eating at night is probably common, and I'd love listeners comment on this on Instagram or feedback to us, so we have a bit more insight. That
Yeah.
when we're busy during the day, because we've all got lots to do, at the end of the day, when we've stopped, we've got that opportunity for us to sort of tune into those cravings, haven't we? And
Yeah.
we're not so busy that we can't stop and go, oh, hello.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, we've
yes.
slowed down. We've slowed down, and often those thoughts, or if there's something going on in your life that's really, really stressful, as soon as you slow down, those thoughts can pop into your head and cause that stress. So the emotional eating is an escape from that as well. But yeah, it's just trying to get into the habit of doing something that is going to be meaningful for you, and maybe also setting rules for yourself. So maybe from Monday to Thursday you have a screen free night where you don't go and watch Netflix and eat, but Friday night's your night where you just go all out. And just think about sort of what's going to work for you, just so you're not taking away. It's not about that, you're not watching Netflix and eating chocolate altogether. We're not like 100% off it, but just making rules for yourself. So
Mm.
on a Friday night, that's my night. Like a lot of people, it's like Friday night's my pizza night. I'm good throughout the week and I enjoy pizza. But making sure that when you eat, there's a lot of emotional eating is quite mindless. It's like you're just eating, you're not even enjoying the food. It's almost like you're not there. But being a mindful eater as well. So, Paul and I have a chocolate's our thing as well, but it's green and black's 85% with Madagascar and vanilla. It's like, oh my goodness. And today we've run out, and it's almost like the the world's come to an end because this chocolate is gone. But when I eat it, I really enjoy it. I put it in my mouth and I enjoy the texture, I enjoy the flavor, I enjoy how it melts in my mouth. And I am one with the chocolate, and I
Yes.
really, really enjoy it. And doing that with all food that you eat. Just rather than eating, like mindless eating can be, when you're scrolling on your phone and you're eating at the same time, or you're watching TV, or you're on your computer finishing off some stuff and eating. That's mindless eating. Try to eat without those inputs of screens and just really enjoy your food and use your senses. Smell the food, taste the food, look at the textures of the food, even have gratitude of where this food has come from. It's like, if you're eating a meal and there's vegetables, just think about the farmer that grew these vegetables. There was a truck driver that brought the vegetables to the fruit shop, and there was somebody who packed the shelves. There are so many people that were involved in bringing food to your plate, and having that gratitude there and really enjoying it, I think, increases your enjoyment of the food. And also just it's about not having those outside distractions.
Yes, those outside distractions when you are eating, it's so easy, isn't it, to just go,
Yeah,
hang on, where'd that go? What
yeah,
happened? What happened to whatever it is that we're enjoying? Because we're not being mindful, and it's probably a beautiful place to start to draw this to a close. Is that we can, and the thing is too, isn't there? Well, she goes again. So, well, let's draw this to a close. No,
yeah.
I've got something else I want to say.
We can
um,
talk for another hour.
I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. I so much I always love to talk to you about. And I'm like, well, I can't have Carly on every second week. I mean, that wouldn't, like, I mean, everyone would learn so much, but got to give other people a go. So the idea that there are no really sort of good and bad foods, are there? This
Mm,
idea that yes, 100% whole foods for 80%. I'm saying 100% agree with you. 80% of our diet, whole foods, unprocessed foods. But then we don't have to deprive ourselves, but we can be much more mindful, like you say, about when we're eating it, not only during that moment of enjoying that piece of chocolate and really taking it in through all of your senses, but also there would be nothing wrong with most people having a small square of dark chocolate after dinner every night if it was
yeah,
only the one.
yes,
That is not what's going to be the issue. The issue is the idea that the food is going to comfort something that can never be comforted by food
Yes,
because you're
yeah.
not hungry.
Yeah.
And I know when I used to talk to people, not with a nutrition degree, but with a strong background in health and physiology, sometimes my clients that I would talk to, I would discuss this, and we would just talk through the experience of it, that because the hunger isn't there, because there isn't that fundamental need for nutrition in that moment, it will never be satisfying. It
Mm.
it won't be satisfying because you're using one method to try to manage something that requires something completely different. And that might
Yes.
mean that people listening might reflect and realize, yes, that's obvious. One, of course, we all know that. But two, in that moment, you could have the one Tim Tam and you could stop there,
Mm.
but or you could have the 9 or 8 in a packet. I should know. No, I don't eat Tim Tams that often. I think I used to know. Um, but are you actually going to feel different at the end of one versus the end of 9? No.
Mm.
You'll feel probably unwell in the tummy. You'll probably feel sick.
You feel
There'll be guilt
guilty.
and shame.
Yeah.
And this spiral of, "I did it again. I'm hopeless.
Yeah.
I'll never be able to change these habits. I don't feel good about myself."
Mm.
And in conjunction with, obviously, as uh, diseases can develop over time with poor nutritional choices and
Yeah.
ongoing excess intake of calories and the like, and
Mm.
processed foods. And so sometimes I think for some people listening, there might be this maybe this reflection that, yes, there is truth in that, and perhaps it's time to find, well, food isn't the answer.
Yeah.
Not that that's a revelation, but that something else could be. That
Yes, yeah.
yes.
And food, I mean, we could talk about this on a whole podcast, but food, if you look at food as medicine, and you look at the research that's going on in the gut microbiome and the effects that an imbalance in your gut microbiome has on mental health, it's because often what people, if they have eaten the processed food, the chocolate, whatever, at night, and then they feel guilty the next morning. So they go, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to eat until 2 o'clock because to make up for it. And then they're hungry, and then they reach for the processed food again, and the cycle continues. So they're not feeding their gut microbiome. They're not feeding their cells. They're not getting that nutrient dense food that we need for health and vitality, and that we need for our mental health. So I would I would always say reset every day. Reset. It doesn't matter what happened the night before. You reset this on today, because that's all you have. All you've got is right here, right now. The past is done. You don't control that, but what you do control is your choices in the future. So really important.
It is, and there was research around the idea that for people who had a mindset of self-compassion and practice that self-compassion of, at the end of the day, I had this to drink and I said I wouldn't, or I ate this, that at the end of the day, if you can have that self-compassion for yourself, that I am human, I am suffering. Suffering is a part of common humanity, and share kindness with yourself and forgiveness with yourself, that those people were less likely to repeat the behavior
Yeah.
in the ensuing sort of days and weeks in this particular study, whereas those that really had that really berating self-talk, they had the gremlin in the driver's seat,
Yeah.
were much more likely to revisit those behaviors. So, Carly, yeah, you're absolutely right. We could talk about this for a long time, and honestly, of course, we will talk again. We absolutely will. In the meantime, I know listeners have already come to you for your coaching.
Yep.
You've got just such a you know for those of you listening who maybe didn't catch episode 1, please go back and listen, because Carly we talked a lot about acceptance
Yeah.
in that particular episode, which would play beautifully. They all play beautifully into one another, the episodes. But Carly is a coach who is so passionate about her work and has such a deep level of knowledge, expertise, compassion and a sense of purpose around her work that, and I don't get commissions, maybe I should, that, if, I recommend people to Carly when they're looking for somebody who does the sort of work that Carly does. And so if you are looking for help, then, I really, Carly's amazing at what she does, and she does it with a full heart and so much experience behind her. So
Thank
how
you.
can people
Thanks,
work with
Jodie.
you, Carl? It's a pleasure.
Well, you can go to my website, carlytaylorcoaching.com.au, and send me there's a form on there that you can send through, or Instagram's Carly underscore Taylor underscore. I don't know why I put the underscores. I don't think there's any more other Carly Taylor Coaching. Just put underscores in between.
And what I'll do is I'll pop all of those details in the show notes, which you can find on my website under the podcast tab. You can find all of the episodes there, or on any podcasting platform.
Great.
Carly, thank you so much for your time today. It's just always such a joy. We need to catch up in between podcasts. It seems to be our podcast catch up, doesn't it?
It does. I know. And I was thinking, when we do speak in between podcasts, we do have such in-depth, great conversations. I love chatting with you.
Oh my goodness. I feel the same. So how about we just stick to pressing record, and then everyone else can just listen in.
Yes. No, thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's episode. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. To keep the conversation going, I'd love you to join me over on Instagram. You'll find me at Dr Jodi Richardson. Also, if you'd like a copy of my free 5-day mini email course, Calm Your Anxious Brain, then jump over to my website, drjodirichardson.com, and you can sign up down the bottom. I've really enjoyed having your company. Thanks so much. See you next.